Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Estrella. I'm the Government Content Insider with TownWeb. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We've got a few more folks that have registered that we're waiting on to jump in. So I'm just going to give them a couple minutes. In the meantime, I have a really quick poll that I'm going to publish. If you wouldn't mind answering that, that'd be great, about whether or not you have any ARPA funds left. See if I hope it went. Yes, it did. I hope it did. Yes. Good stuff.
It's live.
Yes, perfect. But yes, we'll hang out for just a minute or two, and then we'll get going. So grab your coffee, grab your orange juice. If you're on the East Coast, maybe it's grab a Coke. Yeah, I've got my water bottle. So we'll just wait for just a couple of minutes for some folks to get in, and then we'll do a little housekeeping and then get started.
Happy days.
While we're waiting, I'd like to welcome Keith, Steve, and Travis. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you guys here. Travis is a fellow cheesehead of mine in Wisconsin. Keith is joining us from Alabama. And Steve, I'm not sure where you're joining us from. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, that would be awesome. You can just drop that in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. And maybe what it looks like outside your window, too.
Yes.
I promise I'll share what it looks like outside my window. Well, maybe not share, but I'll certainly paint a good picture for you.
As you can see, I window right behind me. It's dark already. I'm hoping you will have blue skies and sunshine on your end.
Oh, yes. Steve is joining us from Phelps. I know where Phelps is. Yes, welcome, Steve. Welcome. Awesome. We're going to wait one more minute. Still got a number of people that were looking to join us, and I just want to give them an opportunity to jump in. And if not a big deal. We've definitely got enough folks here to have a good time, and we'll get started. So just one more minute, and we'll get going. All right, everybody. I think by my watch I have 9:05, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If anybody else decides to jump in, certainly they can do that. But this is being recorded for those of us, for those who aren't able to make it. We're jumping a little late. Or for those of you who are here, if you want to share this with others, absolutely, you'll get this recording after we're done. And so feel free to distribute it as much or as little as you like. Absolutely not a problem for us. So real quick, I'm going to kind of informally introduce myself and then do it again in just a second. But again, my name is Chris Estrella. I'm the Government Content Insider for TownWeb, and I'm very excited to have all of you here. We're going to talk about ARPA funds today and how we can kind of maximize either what we have or what we have left to at least enhance our municipalities and try and make our jobs a little bit better. I dropped a poll in. Would love to see if you guys have any ARPA funds left to spend. I'm presuming you do because you're here, so that's great. But we're just kind of gonna jump right in and get going. So first of all, welcome, and second, a little bit more about me. So I was a municipal clerk treasurer in Wisconsin for almost 17 years. My last municipality was the town of Oakland in Jefferson County. I was there for almost 3 years before my wife and I moved out here to Las Vegas, and more on that in just a second. I was a deputy administrator for 10 years. I am currently an adjunct professor of public administration for Rochester University, just north of Detroit, Michigan. I love it. I love teaching my undergraduate students. I'm off contract right now. Yay, summer. But I love it. I can't wait for fall, and I'm super excited to be back teaching public administration again. I'm also a past president of the Wisconsin Municipal Clerks Association, and I'm still very well connected back at home, but even across the country as well. Of course, being a cheesehead, I love the Packers. Originally, I'm from the East Coast, and my whole family's kind of genesis is from North Jersey. And so I'm a huge Yankees fan, and living in Las Vegas is awesome. I love it. Outside my window today, bright blue skies. It's going to be 105. In-N-Out Burger is just 10 minutes away. It sounds like a great idea for lunch, so I'll probably head there. And but Vegas is awesome. If you've never been here, it's a great place on the Strip. It's a great place off the Strip. There's lots of amazing hiking and biking and even outdoorsy stuff. And then, of course, if you're into gambling and the shows and the food, I love it here. So definitely going to jump in the pool in the backyard today, but love living in Vegas. Miss Wisconsin, miss the cheese, miss Spotted Cow, but love living here in Vegas. So that's a little bit about me. So let's talk about clerks, treasurers, administrators. Let's talk about municipal staff. And we've got some kind of fictional examples here. We've got our fictional clerk. Her name is Betty. She's been a clerk for quite some time, at least through the past 6 administrations. She loves her planner. She loves sticky notes, and she loves following the rules, as most clerks do. I can attest to that. She knows her budget inside and out. She's been doing her job for quite some time, but she definitely knows what she's doing, and she's very comfortable with her skill set and her level of knowledge. On the flip side, we have her deputy clerk, who is Bella. She is kind of new to this whole clerk thing, maybe right out of college, maybe not right out of college, but she loves all things technology. Her budget is on her phone in the Notes app. It's very negotiable. She kind of just, kind of floats from here to there. She read on Instagram about ARPA funds and is kind of interested in what those are. And so these are kind of, these are kind of 2 extremes, but these are also, I believe, 2 really good examples. And for a long time, I was Bella. When I started as a clerk in 2005, I was 25. I was the young kid on the block. I was the Bella, and I don't know that I've necessarily evolved into a Betty yet, but I'm certainly gravitated towards that a little bit more. So just an idea, and this, you can go back to your offices and just kind of observe and see who your Bettys and Bellas are. So it might be a really interesting thing to kind of observe in your offices. But about ARPA. ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. This was passed in March, I believe, I think it was March, but of 2021. And really, this was a strategy from the federal government. It was directly as a result of COVID. For those of you who worked in 2020, the CARES Act in 2020 was kind of the first financial issuance that the federal government did. And it was a smaller distribution, but that was kind of the first instance where the federal government stepped in to kind of stabilize things financially for everybody. And so it really involved the federal government, all state governments, all county governments, all local governments, non-for-profits. Local businesses were somewhat involved on the outside. They weren't directly a part of ARPA. They were more a part of the payment protection plan, making sure that people were getting paid that way. But ARPA funds were generally federal government to other levels of government. And so kind of the reason that we're talking about that, there was this initial push when those ARPA funds were first released, and we'll get a little bit more into the dollar amounts, but when those ARPA funds were first released, what are we going to spend them on? Let's spend them now. And now, because we're coming kind of to the end of the cycle, there's folks who might have some that are left over and they're like, well, what do I spend them on? And so we're going to talk about some of that stuff today and how you can maximize either what you have left or what you have if you haven't used any of it yet. So I'd mentioned this already. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but ARPA funds became available in March of 2021. Again, federal stimulus money really to keep the economy stable, not necessarily to increase or decrease anything, obviously not to decrease, but to increase, but just to keep things kind of status quo until COVID subsided. And you can see here the total amount was to local. This is a breakdown by local, by states and DC, by territories and tribal lands, and then other funds. The total amount was astronomical. I can tell you in my last municipality in Wisconsin that I worked at, the town of Oakland, we received almost $400,000 now it was split over 2 payments, but we received almost $400,000. And for a town of our size, whose budget was just over $1 million, that was a big chunk of change. And it was a very nice windfall, but we also had to set up a plan on how to spend it and be responsible with it and make sure that it was only for one-time uses and that sort of thing. So it's really the primary focus of ARPA funds. And I'm going to fall back a little bit on my teaching as well. When I teach budgeting, I teach, one-time funds versus ongoing expenses and that sort of thing. And I'll get into a little bit more detail as we go along. ARPA funds are for everybody. And there's supposed to be some little icons here. I'm not sure why they didn't transfer over, but literally everybody except if you were a business. State government, local government, county government, municipal government, nonprofits, they were all involved in the distribution of ARPA funds. And so if you were a government of almost any level, you got something. I know that, again, I lived in Wisconsin, so I know the state of Wisconsin got a huge chunk of change. Every county got something. Every municipality got something. It was up to all of us how we were going to spend that with some limited guidelines. And there's my little icons. I forgot that I'd set them up like that. But that's kind of how everything was set up to spend is the federal government really provided some guidelines for us, but those guidelines were very broad and somewhat vague. It's important because COVID was rough. Everybody lived through it in one, I shouldn't say lived through it. Everybody that lived through it in one aspect or another. Some of us were still going to work every day. Some of us were working from home. Everybody saw their financial situations change in some aspect. Again, I'll use myself as an example. We didn't allow people to pay their property taxes in person. And so I was using my cell phone to send pictures of property tax receipts to residents. They were still able to pay their bills, but they couldn't come in and get a receipt in person like they were used to. And, some folks were out of work. Here in Las Vegas, this is before we lived here, but here in Las Vegas, the unemployment rate was up over 30% because, as we all know, nobody was traveling. The tourism industry was completely shut down. So this was the way for the federal government really to try and stabilize the economy as best as they could and make sure that things would still function. And I mentioned this before, the funds really can go towards whatever you want with some guidelines to help you decide how to spend that. And so now we're going to kind of get into some of that and what those things that you can spend are, what those opportunities are for you guys. So kind of big picture stuff. The big one, at least in my part of Wisconsin, was infrastructure. And that really is kind of a buzzword now, a continuing buzzword, but it was roads, it was bridges, it was water pipes, kind of that physical infrastructure. And I can tell you that's what Oakland spent the majority of its ARPA funds on, was roads. We had, I don't even remember how many miles of roads, but a mile of road at that time cost $1 million to completely grind up and repair and make great. And so there were a bunch of smaller roads that we were able to address all at once. It was a huge help, but that didn't address all of our needs. But that's a big one that people spent and continue to spend a lot of money on, is infrastructure, that physical infrastructure. Nonprofits really needed support as well. The government, and I'm not talking the federal government, the state government, county governments, and even local governments step in and kind of provide that funding to nonprofits for services that governments can't provide on their own. And so if governments weren't necessarily collecting money and couldn't increase because citizens were out of work and that sort of thing, what could nonprofits do? They had to increase their services and outreach because so many people were out of work, because so many people were looking for opportunities to do something. And so the increase in that, obviously the only way to address that is with more money, and that's something that just kind of needed to flow through to them. Economic development, this is something that, again, businesses primarily were invited to and encouraged to participate in the payment protection plan. One of the things that we did in Oakland, we had 10 bars or liquor establishments that were licensed through us. And so what we did, and this was allowed under ARPA funds, is we refunded them their liquor licenses for the previous 2 years because they had no business, and that was totally allowed. It was an economic development grant that we were able to provide to them, and it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, in some instances, it was only $500. I know one of my licensed establishments, it was like $2,000. We refunded the cost for all of the operators' licenses so they could serve alcohol, all that stuff. That was what we could do, but they really appreciated it. And so if you have any funds left over, if you want to credit those liquor license establishments, I think that would go a long way in establishing some goodwill too. They really like, there was one in particular, I believe it was the Mink Farm just outside of Cambridge. And we had created kind of a one-page letter, press release type thing. We sent it out to the local newspaper, and it was a local newspaper, but they took that letter that I brought with me with their check, and they pinned it up on their cork board so that everybody that walked in the bar could see it. And they really appreciated it. So just kind of things like that. Think a little bit outside the box. If you can provide some grants, it's not immediate relief or it's big relief, but it's things that you can do. Another thing that I advocated for the staff was one-time bonuses and kind of hazard pay. And this is also allowed under ARPA funds. I can't remember the exact number, but I think we had a very small staff in Oakland. We only had 3 full-time employees and some part-time employees as well, maybe like 4 or 5. And we had a couple of part-time police officers as well. But we gave everybody that worked during COVID between like $500 and $1,000 just to demonstrate to them, hey, we understand what you guys went through. It was a very big deal. We appreciate you being here and continuing to do the work. And so that's just something, again, if you have money that's left over, you're looking for a way to distribute it. I don't know of anybody who couldn't use a little extra cash. I know I could too, but I know they would really appreciate it. Kind of the one thing that we want to focus on is technology, and this is a really big one pre-COVID, but it's gotten even bigger post-COVID. Obviously, increased demands on technology, increased people working from home, rural internet, that sort of thing. And so if you want to upgrade your technology, ARPA funds is a perfect way to do that. And that is actually something that we also did at Oakland. We actually created an ability for me to work from home. We didn't have that before. We also created that ability for my deputy as well. And it really came in handy a couple times because there were times where we thought one of us had COVID and we had to isolate, but I could still work from home and she could still work from home, and it wasn't a problem at all. So even if it's just something as simple as that, as creating the ability, through either a VPN or, screen mirroring or dialing into your network so people can still work from home a little bit. That's something that's a huge technology upgrade. That's what people expect now. They expect that work will continue to get done even after hours or on the weekends or things like that. So how can you automate things like that? And community projects, upgrading park, again, infrastructure, but upgrading parks, just kind of, upgrading facilities, that sort of thing. So there's lots of opportunities. These are big picture ones. Lots of opportunities for ways to spend any money that you might have left. In terms of the technology, there's my check for a water break. In terms of technology, some things that we have seen, a lot of folks have approached us about new municipal branded emails. They might have elected officials still operating on personal emails, which is a big no-no in Wisconsin. I'm pretty sure that's a big no-no everywhere, but That's something that folks have asked us about. Clerk Minutes is an AI solution to automate your minute taking experience so that you don't have to spend 2, 3, 4 hours doing minutes on a super long meeting that can be done in 15 minutes with the help of AI. Another big thing is storage space for digital record keeping. With the onset of moving things more digital, and it kind of ties into online licenses, permits, payments, all that stuff. But with the onset of moving more towards that, there has to be a way that we can secure that, but we can also store that and retrieve what we need to from it. And so whether it's, a big flash drive, if it's an external hard drive, if it's a server, if it's a cloud subscription, there's got to be a way to kind of get on board with that. And so that's another kind of technology piece that you can spend some money on to make things a little bit easier for you. .gov domain is on here, not because it's free. It is free. It's free through the federal government. But I wanted to mention it because it's super important. In the past 4 to 8 years, there's been a big uptick in bad information, in misinformation, in disinformation. And I'm not even talking politics, just like factual, just bad information out there. And so one of the ways to kind of alleviate that and bring more trust to your residents and to your visitors is to have a .gov domain. And I do a separate webinar on that. It's about as long as this one, but we do offer this service for free, and the federal government doesn't charge for it either. But it's one of those things, it really can create, it's something small, but it creates a lot more trust and a lot more engagement just by having .gov after your website. So if you don't have it, I would strongly suggest that you do. I also teach on this as well. So it's a really, it really allows folks to know whether or not they trust the government. That's on their own terms. But this, if you have a .gov website, this is the official website. This is where the official information comes from. This is exactly what I'm looking for. All of it right there. On to some more other things that you could spend money on. Facebook syndication. We've come to hear. We've been notified in the past week. There are states now that are requiring their municipalities to record their meetings or live stream them or both and have them accessible to the public to inspect, just like you would a paper set of minutes. And so those, of course, are unfunded mandates, but these can be one-time expenses that you could spend. So that is something that we offer through Facebook, through live streaming. It's really cool, but I have a feeling, and this is relatively new. The one that I know of for sure is the state of Indiana. They passed a law in 2023 that requires municipalities by July 1st of 2025, so that's next year, to record, live stream, and store those meetings so that people can retrieve them just as you would a paper set of minutes. So it might be something that's taking off. I don't know, but it's definitely, in Indiana, it's kind of a very big deal. Do you want to provide a business directory, or is travel big in your area? Do you have a lot of tourism? How can you kind of incorporate that either into your website or spend on some technology to kind of develop that, kind of like you would economic development, kind of tourism development as well. If anybody is a Top Chef fan, the whole state of Wisconsin over the past, 2-3 months has just been on display via Top Chef. And so I'm not normally a Top Chef fan, but because it's Wisconsin, I watched every episode and I know where they are and blah, 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 blah. So how can you further develop that tourism? Broadband, I mentioned this earlier, Starlink. Do you need upgraded internet access? Especially if you're in rural areas, Starlink, I've heard, I don't live in a rural area, but I've heard Starlink's pretty darn good. So is that something that you could do? Cybersecurity updates, again, kind of in the theme of moving things online and moving things more digital. How can we store them better, but how can we secure them better? And then the big one, I think, of all of these, they're all important, but I think the biggest one is actual hardware upgrades. Do you have computers that can handle the newest technology? Do you have enough storage space? Do you have, do you need barcode scanners? What do you need? The actual physical hardware. So very important stuff to think of. All of this is eligible for ARPA spending. So some guidelines, and I've taken this. The biggest one, the number one, is to use them for one-time costs only. I teach budgeting. I also took a budgeting class in my master's program. I also lived through 17 municipal budgets, so I would like to consider myself a bit of a budgeting expert. Only use ARPA funding for one-time costs, if at all possible. You don't want to set yourself up with a structural deficit and have to kind of come up with that money later on down the road, kicking the can. That's not a responsible way to budget. If it's buying computers, those are one-time costs. If you can get like a 1 or a 2 year deal on Starlink, that's typically, a one-time cost. You'll have to come up with it later. But if that's what you need to do to get your internet upgraded, that's what you need to do. But try and focus on one-time costs as much as you can. Document. I can't say that enough. I had a lot of experience with this with the CARES Act. I had enough of it with the ARPA Act. The federal government requires all the documentation. They may not be, fortunately, I can say this, fortunately, they're very broad in what they would allow, and they were kind of liberal in, not in a political sense, but if you've got a receipt or you've got some documentation, it wasn't super specific what documentation they were looking for, but make sure you have something because they're going to want something. And I think maybe the most important thing about these ARPA funds is that they must be allocated by December 31st, 2024, and they must be spent 2 years later. Otherwise, you have to give it back. And I mean, say what you will about it being free money, but essentially that's free money. Yes, it's coming from somewhere, but from a municipal perspective, that's money that you don't want to have to give back. You want to be able to spend that on those one-time upgrades, on those one-time expenses, and upgrade things as best as you can. So some best practices, make sure that whatever you're spending on, whether it's an organization, if it's a tool, if it's technology, whatever, make sure it's ARPA approved. Some folks have that on their website, and I'll give a little plug to TownWeb, of course, because I'm working for TownWeb. We are ARPA approved, but if you're not sure, you can certainly check with your lawyer. You can check with the ARPA funds guidelines. More on that in a second. Your lawyer is costly, but they will give you the definitive answer, and I think that's very important. Have a 5 or a 10-year plan. If you have one-time funds, and again, I'm gonna pick on computers, but if you have funds from ARPA that you're going to spend on computers, have a plan. Maybe you don't spend it all this year, but you space it out over a couple of years, and that way the technology isn't like 2 or 3 years old by the time you purchase it. Keep the paperwork, whether it's paperwork or actual paperwork. You're going to need that paperwork for reporting, and spend all the money. I just mentioned this, but spend all the money or you have to give it back. I know that would make the federal government happy to have some of that money back, but the law was passed. It was earmarked for everybody. I mean, God forbid COVID happens again in 25, 30 years, whatever, but I don't see something like this happening again, potentially in my lifetime. And so this could be literally a once in a lifetime type of deal. And so from here, where do we start? Some great pages that we can go to for information. The official website for ARPA funds, it's a different kind of acronym, but this is a link to the website. They also have, the Treasury has a YouTube channel devoted completely to ARPA funds, and they have a bunch of videos. Some are 15 minutes long, some are an hour long, but there's at least 20 of them. I went and checked it out. I was really impressed. They have a lot of information out there. And of course, I know everybody's busy. I know everybody has stuff to do, but if you're looking for information, specific information, and you're not necessarily a person who wants to read it, these videos are great. They really do a great job of boiling it down. We have a little spot on our website as well, talking about ARPA and how we fall under that and how you can use it for technology upgrades for your website, that sort of thing. But these are just 3 resources that you can go to. Obviously, the first 2 are official government sources, and then the third one is from us. But they're all great resources that really can help you. And so one of the things that we want to look at is what are other folks doing? And so we looked at Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. They really did a nice breakdown of all the money that they received, how it was allocated, what it was spent on. They went kind of above and beyond, in my opinion. I certainly didn't do anything this detailed when I was clerk treasurer in Oakland, but I did always keep my board informed of how much we had left and what we spent it on and that sort of thing. But they were allocated a total of $11 million. 9.2 million was appropriated by the city council, and they spent just over half of that as of September of last year. So I would imagine they're continuing to spend, but they have a really nice breakdown. And we got this right off of their website. They have a really nice breakdown of what they spent it on and what they could spend more on and things like that. It's a really great kind of visual representation of a bunch of numbers. And I know, some folks are numbers folks and some folks are pictures folks. I'm a picture person. And so it's really great to see this great breakdown. It's very much labeled, and we could go into the details of it, but I'd really like to have you guys check it out on your own and just and see it from your perspective. But they have a spot for questions if you want to ask anything like that. But it's a really great thing to do. And I also would suggest doing it just to let the public know, like, hey, this is how much money we've gotten. This is what we spent it on. This is what we're thinking of spending it on or planning on spending it on. It's really great just to let the people know essentially what their money is going toward, because again, it all came from us in one way or the other. And so just some quick FAQs to kind of wrap things up. How much money does your municipality have either left over from ARPA or as that you haven't spent yet, or did you not spend any of it yet? Unfortunately, that's something that we can't answer. You guys have to know that. Can you get new tech using ARPA funds? Yes, absolutely. Do you get to keep the leftovers? Sadly not. You have to give that back. How long do you have to access the funds? You have to allocate them by the end of the year this year, and you have to spend them by the end of the year 2026. Can you partner with any other municipalities or give your ARPA funds to other organizations? Yes, you can. There are some guidelines about that where you can partner with other municipalities who are already ARPA approved, counties, school districts, that sort of thing. If you're looking for other ways to spend, partner with somebody. Maybe there's some kind of trade-offs that are some benefits that you can gain from partnering with somebody else. And where can you find more information? It's really the Department of Treasury. It's home.treasury.gov, but I included the link right here to the webpage. And so lastly, we're going to come back to Betty and Bella. There's always going to be a need for Bettys, and there's always going to be a need for Bellas. Bettys are really important because they understand the process, because they've been doing it for so long. And it doesn't matter if it's a clerk or a treasurer or administrator. Those folks who have been in their jobs for a long time really understand how things work. At the same time, we're going to need those Bellas to really bring in technology to that and improve the process as much as they possibly can. So if you combine them, and this is something, it's really interesting. I would actually say, when I started as a deputy clerk, I was a Bella, and my boss, Mike, wasn't necessarily a Betty, but he was 25 years older than me. And so he looked to me for technology questions and innovation and how can we improve things. And so it's really cool if you have people like, two people or a group of people where you can get different perspectives. They're a great team. Put them together. They're an unbelievable team. And I will say that I'm biased, of course, but Mike and I were an unbelievable team. But we are here as Town Web. We are definitely here to help you guys, whether you're a Betty, a Bella, a combination of both, or something completely outside of that we never even thought of. So please, please, please reach out if you need anything. Thank you so much for attending. I'm going to stick around in case people have questions. But here's contact information, my email, and then the general sales email. If you want to call, anything like that, by all means, please do that. But we're so happy that you guys were able to join us. And I hope that you found this informative. And I hope you don't have a whole lot of ARPA funds left to spend. But if you do, that I gave you some more ideas on what to spend them on. So I will stick around for another few minutes. I see that Cheryl popped in and said hello. Hello, Cheryl. We do have a few more people that joined us. So if you have any questions, by all means, please drop them either in the questions tab or in the chat. I'll be monitoring those right now. And I'll stick around for another 5-10 minutes. We'll just kind of go from there. And I think I mentioned this, but thank you for attending, everybody. The slides will be available. Yes, you will actually get a recording of this after the meeting, and we can also include the slides for you so you can have them. Yes. Great question. You're welcome. Of course. Other questions? Definitely have some time left. Ooh, I see Cheryl is typing a question or something. We'll see. Might I know what type of projects are not allowed? That's actually a really good question. I actually don't. What I can tell you is that it's really hard to find something that's not allowed versus something that is. So, for example, another project that we in Oakland decided to do, and again, this is infrastructure, but we had some water infrastructure, some sewer pipes that needed to be replaced. We were able to use ARPA funds to pay for that. So what I would do is I would consult the information that the Treasury has shared and find out. Do you have something specific that you're thinking of? I'll tell you this. I can't see why it wouldn't be. I'll put it that way. If you have, I would certainly check, but I can't see why that wouldn't be, because that, for me, that revolves around infrastructure, especially if you're going to replace that with a new hospital or anything like that. They're very liberal with what you can use this money for, and so I could see that being covered. Don't quote me on that. Again, consult your attorney, consult the materials, but at least off the top of my head, I don't see why they wouldn't have that covered. Another great question. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions? I'll stick around for another couple of minutes, but if anybody needs to jump off, by all means, feel free to do so. I've got more work to do later, but I've definitely got some more time to do now. Some time to handle questions now if anybody has any. Well, I think since we're not seeing any, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just kind of go like that. I think since we're not seeing any more questions, and I'm seeing some folks drop off, I think we're just going to call it like that. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next one, because there's always a next webinar coming.
Thank you so much, everybody.